So I'm from the US. I haven't lived in the US since 2001. I've lived in, I think, 9 countries now, either in Western Europe or in the Americas, sort of North and South America. Currently living in Mexico. Had, like every one of us in the Bitcoin space, had my own journey. Uh, One of the first things that happened to me that's memorable is I lived in Argentina in part of this life journey. Moved there in 2012, right when they implemented currency controls. It was a disaster. Obviously, Argentina has experienced hyperinflation. You also see a high adoption of crypto and Bitcoin in Argentina and stablecoins because of it. But that was sort of predated all that. But I had my first experience living in a developing country that experiences hyperinflation and currency controls and how it affects your life in dramatic ways. And in fact, we lived there in 2012, and by 2013 we moved because we couldn't deal with it. It was, for your listeners who aren't familiar with it, give you some examples of some of the things that happened to us. We couldn't send money. I couldn't send money to family in other parts of the world because the government had to approve if you send any money anywhere. I couldn't take money out of an ATM outside of the country without previous government permission. So when I traveled, I couldn't get access to my money. The currency controls made it so that, they started to experience hyperinflation for multiple times, but the time we were living there, and the businesses tried to charge people in dollars because of it, but dollars were hard to come by, and they had this market they called the blue market or dollar blue, and you had to go to these like sketchy little stores in the middle of nondescript areas and go and bring Argentine pesos and get dollars to go pay your rent and everything. And, as an American who believes in freedom and liberty, that was extremely shocking to my core that I don't actually, this money isn't really mine and I can't do what I want with it when I want it. You fast forward, I got into crypto in 2016, 17, but more not for gambling or betting or anything. In fact, I didn't even buy crypto when I got into crypto. I got into it for the decentralization narrative and believing that we could build the Ethereum view of the world, sort of a decentralized world computer. And I mistakenly thought that the problem with the loss of the middle class and, the Occupy movement that emerged in the States and everywhere else, that they were right to be upset. But I thought the reason they were upset, I thought the underlying core problem was capitalism had gone awry. And I have a PhD in business. I'm a capitalist by nature. I've written 3 or 4 books that have the title capitalist in it. And yet I started to question capitalism. And I thought crypto and blockchains could solve that. And then only in the last year and a half did I come to realize I had misdiagnosed the problem, that it wasn't capitalism, it was fiat. It was the money that was causing all these problems. And even though I have all these degrees and I've taught in business schools and all the rest of it, I didn't know, I didn't understand until the last 18 months. And as I got deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole, I went from appreciating Bitcoin to acquiring some Bitcoin, but still holding some other crypto over the last year and a half. And then I think it was November of last year, I rotated everything out of anything else and put it all in Bitcoin. And I've been like that since then.
I love that. So you went all in. I love that a lot. Maybe before we get to the Bitcoin, why did you flee USA? Were you just like getting out there, or like was there a specific reason?
That's a good question. I don't think I felt in the moment I was fleeing it per se. I have this wandering spirit and I wanted to live in other parts of the world. And I knew that there was a bigger world out there. I'm not an ethnocentric guy. And a lot of Americans are. I'm not. And, I had previous exposure to Europe from when I finished my master's degree. I spent a semester in Copenhagen. And it opened my eyes so much to a different world, traveling by train and the culture and the history. And I loved so much of Europe and just felt more European in my spirit. And, there are a lot of things I didn't like about the US then. And to be honest, a lot of Bitcoiners probably be offended by things I'll say right now, but that's all right. There's a lot of things I still to this day do not like about the US and have not had a calling that I have to live there again. I'm not opposed to it, but there's historical problems around discrimination, and not against me, but racial discrimination, etc. Um, I don't like being so car dependent. I got used to Europe, and I lived 9 years in Barcelona. I didn't have a driver's license. I rode my bike to the train, took the train. If I needed to be in a car for something, I could take a taxi, no problem. My wife had a car, so of course we could go places together in her car, but with my daughter and everything. But I really like that lifestyle that Europe offered, and I still do. And there's some things I still prefer about Europe, but when it comes to Bitcoin and CBDCs, not so much.
Would you say is the European lifestyle outside of politics and the political system and CBDCs more Bitcoiny, like more more on the golden age side?
Oh, that's an interesting way of reflecting it. Yes and no. I mean, I certainly would say I personally prefer the lifestyle of Europe better as a Bitcoiner or not as a Bitcoiner. I like that you're not car dependent. I like that you have great rail infrastructure and mass transit. I like the way the cities are built that are more dense. I like walkability. Walkability is huge for me. And that's, there's people in the Bitcoin community that are all bragging about, how many kilometers or miles they walk every day, which is an amazing thing. And I'm all for it. And I do the same thing. But when I lived in Europe, it was a lot easier for me to do it. I now live in Monterrey, Mexico, which feels a lot like the US. In fact, they want it to be like the US. So it's extremely car dependent. So that stuff I don't like. As far as it being more Bitcoiny outside of the public policy, I think what US still has that you don't really find that much in many other countries is the true embracing of freedom, of liberty, of the world's your oyster. You can build anything you want. You can Nothing limits you except your own imagination, your own capacity to be an entrepreneur, to build something. And that part is much more of an American mindset. And I also feel like that's also highly aligned to a Bitcoin value.
It's you said you studied, like you wrote 3 books that had the title or capitalist in the title. How would you define capitalism, and is Bitcoin kind of enabling real and true like I think when we say capitalism, it's a word that gets thrown around a lot, and thrown around a lot in wrong ways. I think, even though I'm not an expert on it, I did not study it or anything like that. I just feel like, like how can we have capitalism if capital itself is not free with the fiat system and those things? Is Bitcoin then the true capitalist system?
So that's, I think, part of my journey to becoming a toxic Bitcoin maximalist myself was recognizing that fiat was the problem, not capitalism. So I could stay with my mindset of capitalism and not move beyond it. So one of my books was called Post-Capitalist Entrepreneurship, and it was in response to the Occupy movement. And that's when I first started diving into Bitcoin or blockchains in particular, and crypto and everything else. That was like 2016 and 17. But in hindsight, as I reflect now on my journey, my intellectual journey, and where I see the world today, I would say absolutely that fiat is the problem. Bitcoin is the solution. Bitcoin can enable the ultimate expression of capitalism, where you truly have free movement of labor, goods, and money, sound money. And one thing that's interesting, I wrote about it briefly in my intro to my book, is that Schumpeter is an Austrian economics. I don't know if you've come across Schumpeter, Joseph Schumpeter.
No, actually not.
So he's, by some people, considered the father of entrepreneurship in terms of like economic academic thinking about what entrepreneurs do. And Schumpeter talks about creative destruction and how in truly perfect markets. So he was basically trying to explain how is it if you have perfect markets that are assumed in capitalist and economic principles, then why are there these windows of time when some entrepreneur is able to extract exorbitant profits? Because presumably in the freedom of free flow of information, goods, economy, etc., there is no information asymmetry. Everybody knows everything. They're all omniscient. And then therefore there is no way to actually profit and have exceptional margins. And he was the sort of the driver of this understanding that what entrepreneurs actually do in truly free markets, capitalist markets in their most purest form, is that they uncover things that no one else has discovered yet. And they're able to create through creative destruction, is what he called it. They creatively destruct our current understanding of through the information we have. They detect information asymmetry that no one else has identified yet. And so they're able to exploit an information asymmetry that no one knows about yet. They capitalize on it, but in true capitalist behavior, anytime it becomes now known that there is this margin opportunity, others will come to it and they'll compete away the margins. And so the best entrepreneurs basically have to be on this continuous cycle of creative destruction of what we know as the information we use that we think is perfect information, but it's flawed. So yeah, in that context, I think when you combine Schumpeter from the Austrian school with Bitcoin and the rest of our understanding of capitalism, I think then you get the perfect outcome or closer to it.
That's super interesting. I like the way of looking at it. So you kind of like an entrepreneur is a adventurous guy that or girl that just like searches something, and once he discovers something, he can make a lot of margin. But as soon as it's discovered, other people will be like, hey, that's a great opportunity. We'll go in, and then the competition is lowering the margin for all of them till it's a commodity basically, and it's like barely profitable. Like
That's exactly
like
what's happening with Bitcoin Treasuries right now, you could argue, right? So clearly Michael Saylor, he got the conviction as an individual. He recognized a window and opportunity to deploy that conviction he had, not just in privately acquiring Bitcoin, but also in turning his company into a Bitcoin Treasury company. He started in 2020. It's been an evolution, and because of regulation, because of other things, he's been able to really capitalize on it. Now a whole bunch of people are coming into the market to do the same thing. Unlike the way Schumpeter envisioned it, though, this is a fascinating thing I don't think I've ever witnessed before, and I'm not sure we'll ever see it quite like this again outside of the world of Bitcoin. I mean, you could argue in open source some of these values apply, but I've never seen a scenario where a Schumpeter-like disruptive, creative destruction thing is happening, and the individual who had that information asymmetry and took advantage of it, instead of hoarding that knowledge and keeping it so that he could extend the length of time he has this competitive advantage in the marketplace, he's willingly, publicly, and aggressively sharing it with anyone and anyone who wants to listen and adopt the same model. Now, you could say he's doing that because only it benefits him, because in this scenario, Bitcoin is uniquely developed in a way that aligns all stakeholders in the same journey. And so it's in his best interest for others to do it because it increases the value of his company. But I think it's even more than that. It is that, but it's more than that. And that, I think it'd be interesting to hear Schumpeter's take on this behavior in the Bitcoin world, because it isn't what you would have seen in historical capitalist markets.
I guess it's also about branding in the way that, like, when he is so outspoken about it, he builds a brand, and brands usually can charge a premium on top of something that is a commodity. I mean, like the like shoes that are made for like $5, you can buy them for like $100 or something like that. What he is doing with Strategy B might have some really interesting future implications, what he's doing in 50 years with that company. I mean, what the company is doing in 50 years, because they build a brand of being the Bitcoin company, Bitcoin Treasury company, being maybe like a service provider for other businesses and stuff like that. So it's really interesting watching Strategy with Michael Saylor and seeing that firsthand is like, wow, like that's incredible. I always underestimated that company every year. I've never been invested. I had Michael Saylor, the CEO and the chairman, now no longer CEO, on my podcast, but I still never bought a single share of MicroStrategy. Probably one of my bigger mistakes the last year. So I've underestimated them from the very beginning, and so I'm just amazed to see how they execute that, and I'm also amazed how many Bitcoin they can acquire. Like I'm like just shocked by the amount of Bitcoin they already got. Like we only have 21 million. How many do they got now? Like 500,000 something.
565,000, yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah. Like my last one was like 500,000.
No company is going to ever overtake them, in my opinion. I think 21, if you ask me, 21 or Jack Mallers might be the one that will give them the best run for the money so far. Now, that's before some company like an Apple or Microsoft or Meta decide to enter, because they could enter with force with the amount of capital they have on the books plus what they could attract. But I still don't think so. I think they had those years of acquiring in smaller amounts when no one else was doing it at much lower valuations. I think I saw the data. I think their average Bitcoin purchase is something like 67,000 out of the 565,000, and now we're approaching double that value now. And so you and I know, and all your listeners know, where the price of Bitcoin is going to go over time. And so how is it possible somebody else could get, and also Saylor and Strategy aren't stopping. It's not like, okay, they have 565,000, they're happy, they'll be done with that. No, they're going to keep growing too. So how does anyone, the next highest has like 45,000 Bitcoin. So he has more than 10x the next largest player in the space. I just don't think anyone will catch them. That's a mode that's going to be almost impossible to catch. They will absolutely, going back to your point about brand building, I could be wrong, but I don't actually think Saylor's doing this as much for brand building, including his work to engage other CEOs to get them to adopt. I was at the Strategy World Bitcoin for Corporations conference in Orlando just less than 2 weeks ago at the time of recording. And he's sharing the stage, sharing the spotlight with all the other CEOs. When you watch him on Bitcoin Twitter, he's promoting all these other CEOs, and I think he means it. When you have the level of conviction you and I and everyone else we know has in the Bitcoin space around Bitcoin, you want other individuals, other institutions, other companies, other actors to also share in the future of this network together. And it isn't. I mean, when I used to interact with toxic Bitcoin maxis, I thought they were pumping their back. And that was one of the reasons it took me longer to become a Bitcoin maxi myself, is, as somebody who's academically trained up through PhD, I have a tendency to want to be more objective about things. And even though I am very passionate about things too, but I want to have my knowledge be based on sound reasoning and logic, and not just influenced because a bunch of people say I have to do it. And I used to think that these toxic maximalists were doing it because they were pumping their bags, but it's not. When you get that deep into it and you have that level of conviction and you see what's coming and you see the Titanic is going underwater and you have any empathy for humanity, you want to convince the world to see what we see before it's too late. And I honestly feel that Saylor's conviction to Bitcoin is that. And his conviction to getting other companies on board is the same. Like, hey, if you don't have Bitcoin on your balance sheet, you're probably going under sooner or later, and your shareholders are going to pay the price for it. So why don't you get on board? I mean, Saylor knows that whether Semler or 21 or Mara or anybody buys more Bitcoin, Bitcoin's going up forever, Laura, and it will go up with or without them. So I don't think he's doing it as a self-serving thing. I think he's doing it as a true Bitcoin maximalist.
I 100% agree with that. Even though I think he's building brand without maybe knowing it and intentionally, like he's definitely brought the strategy discussion in so many Bitcoin conversations, which wasn't there before. But I don't think his intentions is there at all. And one of the interesting things. I've forgotten now where I was going. Oh shit. I was going with MicroStrategy because I think it was the perfect size and the perfect moment. Like he had the majority control of it, and it was not a huge company. Like it's a huge company, but it's not an Apple, it's not a Meta, it's not an Alphabet, which allowed him to not pump the price. Because if now Apple comes in and says, oh yeah, we will acquire some Bitcoin, the price doubles tomorrow. I don't know like what happens, but the price really rips if a player like Apple, Alphabet or Meta comes in and says, let's convert like 5 or 10% of our portfolio of our cash reserves into Bitcoin as an alternative, even if they're really conservative and almost like very protective in the wording, how they say it. I can guarantee you that the price will rip. Like this is a whole, no matter when this happens. So this is another aspect of if a player comes in with enough capital, the price is going to rip away, and they might never get to the MicroStrategy position.
I think that's the problem. Either because of their brand or just the capital they have, it would be hard for a major player to come in and acquire as much as Saylor has at Strategy. I think we're going to see big plays happen. I think we might see the way to do it would be like through a private vehicle. Like imagine Apple and Mubadala, the sovereign fund out of Abu Dhabi that's been stacking and buying Bitcoin either directly or through ETFs, I think. Imagine, I don't know, I'm just making this up. Apple and Mubadala decide to join forces and create a separate entity under some kind of unknown brand, maybe not even go public with it anytime soon, because as soon as they go public, they're going to be disclosed. It's hard. You can't go public without disclosing who your shareholders are. So be a little bit complicated. But what if you did it under a private umbrella and nobody knows who you are and you're just quietly stacking? The other thing I think we might see, it's tricky, especially when you see the MNAVs the way they are, the multiple of net asset value, and they're over 2. But like, I think you're going to see some M&A activity in this space.
Thank you for watching this video. This was only a snippet of the podcast. And if you want to watch the full episode and get all of the context of this episode, you can click right here or here. Oh, maybe also here.